Welcome to another Algebra 1 video tutorial. In 11.4 we'll be doing common monomial factoring. Our goal will be to understand factoring as the reverse process of multiplication, concentrating on common monomial factors and their application to the division of a polynomial by a monomial. Alright, so example 1. What are the factors of 49x cubed? So what goes into 49x cubed besides 1 in itself? Well, 1 does. 7 does, 49 does, x does, x squared does, x cubed, and combinations of all those. Okay, so 1, 7, 49, x, 7x, 49x, 1x squared, 7x squared, 49x squared, x cubed, 7x cubed, and 49x cubed. So that's kind of a tedious process to list all of them, but those will be the factors of 49x cubed. 1 and itself, 49x cubed, those are called trivial factors because trivial factors would be factors of anything itself, and 1 go into any expression. Find the greatest common factor of 12x cubed y and 16x squared. Now we could list every single factor of both of those terms and then find the greatest common one, but I'll show you maybe a quicker way. So you look at 12 and 16. What's the greatest common factor of 12 and 16? Well, 4 is. 4 goes into both of those. So we've taken care of the numbers or the coefficients. Okay, between x cubed and x squared, its greatest common factor would be x squared. We can't use x cubed because x squared doesn't have a factor of x cubed. Okay, and then this one has a y, but this one does not have a y, so it's not a common factor at all. So 4x squared would be the greatest common factor, rather than listing out every single one like we did on the last screen and listing out all the factors of 49x cubed. We can kind of just analyze the coefficients and each individual variable and then come up with what's the greatest common factor. All right, find the GCF, which stands for greatest common factor, of 10x cubed, 15x squared, and 20x squared y squared. So in this case, we look at the coefficients 10, 15, and 20. What's the greatest common factor of 10, 15, and 20? Well, 5 is. 5 goes into each of those, and that's the greatest common factor of the coefficients. All right, so we have x cubed, we have x squared, and we have x squared. So the greatest in common between all of them would be x squared. Okay, and then we go to y, but only one of them has a y squared. These other don't even have y's, so there are no y's in common. So just 5x squared would be the GCF of those three terms. All right, so what we're going to use that is to factor a trinomial like this. Okay, so what is factoring? Factoring, that's the process of expressing a given number or expression as a product. So remember on the beginning screen, it's the reverse process of multiplication. And then to factor something completely means it's going to be the representation of a polynomial as a product of prime polynomials, meaning there is no more common factors, so it's been factored completely. Because you can factor out a common factor, but you want to factor out the greatest common factor so that you end up with prime polynomials. Okay, so we have three terms and we want to factor out the GCF. So you don't have to necessarily write this down, but what we're going to do is, so this is factored completely, is take out the greatest common factor and then show that that's a monomial times a polynomial, and then it'll be factored. Okay, so between 36, 9, and 3, the GCF would be 3. Between d squared, and d cubed, d squared is the greatest in common, two of them. Okay, f, they don't all have an f, so there's not an f in common on all three. G cubed, g, and g, so g would be the g to the first. So they all have at least one, but that's the most they have in common. Okay, so we go ahead and factor that out. So it would be 3d squared g times the quantity. Okay, so it's like factoring something out, reverse process, so it's like dividing it out. Okay, so 3 times what is 36? Well, 12. Okay, d squared times d squared, that'd be 1. We don't need any more d's there because it's already d squared. We need an f there because our GCF didn't have one, and we need a g squared, so when we multiply these back together, we get 36d squared fg cubed. Okay, we're going to go to the next term, minus. Okay, we had 9, we factored out a 3, so we'd be left with 3. We had a d squared, we factored out a d squared, so multiply that by 1. F, we didn't factor out an f, so we still have an f. G, we factored out a g, so we end up with that. If you multiplied 3d squared g times 3f, you'd end up with 9d squared fg. Okay, go to the next one. Plus 3, we took out a 3, so we're left with a 1 there. And you would write 1 if there was nothing else there, but we have a d cubed, we took out d squared, so there's still a d, 1d there. G, we divided out a g, so we're left with just like a times 1. Okay, so that would be factored completely. These are prime polynomials, meaning they have no common factors anymore. All right, simplify. 4x squared y minus 8xy squared all over 2xy. So this is not necessarily a new problem for you, but it's kind of to show you the relationship. They're really dividing out a 2xy. We're taking out a common factor of 2xy, but we're also just taking 4x squared y divided by 2xy minus 8xy squared divided by 2xy. But this is no different than the factoring process. It's undoing a multiplication. So we're just dividing here. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. Y divided by y is 1. 8 over 2 is 4. X over x is 1. Y squared over y is y. So this reduces to 2x minus 4y. Factor this polynomial completely. Okay, so this would be a good one to try on your own if you wanted to. Find the GCF first, and if you want to pause the video and see if you get the hang of this, I'll work it as well. All right, so the first thing you want to do is find the GCF, because that's what you're going to take out. So the GCF. Greatest common factor, 14, 28, and 21. I would say 7 is the greatest common factor between 14, 28, and 21. All right, between b cubed, b squared, and b, well, they all have at least 1, but that's the most they have in common. C squared, c cubed, and c to the fourth, so they have a c. They have 2 of them in common. C squared is the greatest in common. So we're going to factor out a 7bc squared. And what's left? Well, we had 14 divided out of 7, so we're left with 2, because 7 times 2 is 14. B cubed, we divided out of b, so we're left with b squared, because b times b squared is b cubed. C squared, we divided out of c squared, so we have a 1 there, but we don't need 1 because we already have a 2b squared, so we don't need a placeholder there. 28 divided by 7, that is 4. B squared divided by b is b. C cubed divided by c squared is c, so we're left with a minus 4bc in the middle term. And 21 divided by 7 is 3. B divided by b is 1. C to the fourth divided by c squared is c squared. All right, so this would be this monomial times this trinomial. This is this trinomial completely factored. All right, that wraps this up. Your assignment will be 11-4, page 678, number 2 through 26 evens. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.